So, it seems Kyle Kulinski's heroes have been failing him recently. It turns out that Noam Chomsky, famous left-wing author and linguist, has close links with Jeffrey Epstein. This was disappointing, obviously, for people who hold him in high regard on the left.
But it just sucks at a personal level. They say never meet your heroes. Never learn that your heroes hung out with Jeffrey Epstein. This is what I'm going to spin it to that. Never learn that your heroes hung out with Jeffrey Epstein.
You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half. And now.
Just to say, credit where credit is due. Kyle covered this story honestly. He could have ignored it or making some BS excuse for Chomsky's behavior, but he didn't. We all want to see ourselves as not being idolatrous, but it does suck when someone you look up to lets you down, and I'm sure it wasn't pleasant to cover this. I can't say the same for his coverage of another one of his heroes, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, aka Big Booty Latina.
AOC, that's my favorite big booty Latina.
Want to do a little selfie?
Because in the last while, AOC has shown herself to be increasingly authoritarian. So Kyle made a video reacting to AOC's statement when she urged the Biden administration to simply ignore a federal judge's ruling against an abortion pill, which is a crazy, reckless, authoritarian thing to say.
All right, guys, so we just talked about contradictory federal court rulings on the abortion pill. You had a right-wing, super conservative judge in Texas said, we're just going to go ahead and slap this down for the whole country. No more abortion pill. And then you had, I believe it was in D.C., a federal court said, no, this is allowed. And so it's an interesting predicament to be in. Look, I don't think this is that complicated, though. When you have two contradictory rulings and you're the executive branch, you go with the interpretation that you more agree with, right?
No, not right, actually. You appeal the decision, obviously, which is exactly what the Biden administration ended up doing.
Imagine doing the opposite of that. I will now go with the one I disagree with, even though we have one court ruling equally powerful that says the opposite, the thing I agree with. It would just be insane.
I'm not a lawyer myself, but Kyle's simplistic understanding of how law works is laughable.
Just heard me ask the secretary about was something that you called on the Biden administration to do, which is just to simply ignore the court ruling. That's a pretty stunning position if you think about it in the abstract, about the notion of just ignoring a judge's position.
Is it really stunning when you have contradictory decisions? It seems like the most obvious, straightforward, common sense thing to do.
Common sense, if you have no idea about law in the slightest. Laws bump into each other all the time. There's a lot of law throughout time, and these discrepancies are resolved through precedent, amendments, etc. The Biden admin has many ways to fight this ban legally, which is exactly what they're doing.
So why is this stunning in any way, shape, or form?
Kyle is brazenly showcasing his ignorance. It's stunning because this is undermining our entire society. It's what dictators do when things don't go the way they like. There are checks and balances for a reason. Contradictions should be resolved by the courts, not by one man, a senile old man, in this case. Just imagine for 1 second that Donald Trump decided he wanted to ignore laws that he didn't agree with. Imagine the freakout that would arise from that. Do they not realize how dangerous of a precedent they would be setting?
What if the Supreme Court decided tomorrow that indentured servitude is actually constitutional, and it would be unconstitutional to ban indentured servitude? Would it be the radical extremist thing to do to ignore the court? Or would it be the radical extremist thing to do to civility hump and norm hump and institution hump and say, yes, our overlords have declared that indentured servitude is correct factually, and we will allow indentured servitude now?
Ignoring that absolute cringe. It's one thing to protest and fight for reform. That I can understand. But it's another thing to pick and choose which laws to abide by. When the system works for you, it's okay. But when it doesn't, ignore it. There's no rule of law if you can just ignore it whenever it pleases you.
FDR, in many instances, ignored the courts. He threatened to pack the court because they were going to slap down the New Deal and say, this is all unconstitutional. He said, look, I will pack this court and it will become constitutional, so you better do the right thing. And then they did the right thing.
No, could you repeat it? Because I can't believe my fucking ears.
He's saying it like it's a good thing. That was one of the most authoritarian things that FDR did. Apart from maybe the whole concentration camp thing. Ugh. Historically, Perón of Argentina packed his Supreme Court, as FDR did. His newly appointed judges ruled as constitutional the conviction of Ricardo Balbin, leader of the main opposition party, for disrespecting Perón. He effectively ruled as dictator without the normal checks on power. In fairness to AOC and Kyle, I think they're just too stupid to realize that this is what they're advocating for.
It stems from this misnomer that the institutions are pristine and immaculate and perfect as they are, and it doesn't require work and maintenance to make them do the right thing. No, it absolutely does.
Reforming and maintenance is completely different from just ignoring it. He should protest, advocate, file lawsuits, whatever he has to, but calling on the president to ignore the Supreme Court is what dictators do.
They don't care about the implications of their actions.
Sounds like projection. While AOC might be able to dupe useful idiots, she's had an authoritarian streak for a while now. For example, she put pressure on Apple and Google to take down Parler, their conservative social media site. She advocated for similar bans on Fox News and Tucker Carlson for alleged incitement of violence during the January 6th fiasco. Even though Tucker Carlson was always against Stop the Steal. This is often the problem with left-wingers, though of course it happens on the right too. They're right at the end of the day, and you're wrong, so they can use whatever techniques they need to enact their policies and ideas. It doesn't matter how draconian or authoritarian they are. I'll replay that clip of Kyle talking about FDR because it best exemplifies what I'm talking about.
FDR, in many instances, ignored the courts. He threatened to pack the court because they were going to slap down the New Deal and say, this is all unconstitutional. He said, look, I will pack this court and it will become constitutional, so you better do the right thing. And then they did the right thing.
It's okay to act like a dictator, as long as you're doing, quote unquote, the right thing. The problem with this myopic and idiotic opinion is that pretty much everyone thinks that they are doing the right thing. Pro-life people think the right thing is to abandon abortion pills. Pro-choice people think the right thing is the opposite. Christ, even Hitler thought he was doing the right thing.